I'm Blake Hargreaves. Welcome to Future Stops. The music you're hearing is the Interstellar Suite, adapted from the soundtrack to the 2014 Hollywood blockbuster Interstellar, and performed by Roger Sayer at Temple Church, London. Sayer is the organist at this famous church, which once upon a time was the home of the Knights Templar and doubled as a bank, protecting the savings of the rich from the hands of the monarchy. Known internationally for its fabulous acoustics, the church was chosen by composer Hans Zimmer and his team for Interstellar's original soundtrack recording. Sayer found himself enmeshed in the making of a Hollywood blockbuster totally by accident, as his beginnings on the pipe organ were humble and church-focused.
Yes, my grandfather was a self-taught organist, and I used to attend services at his church, sitting by him on the organ. So I was interested in the liturgy as much as the instrument itself. So the church, it was important to me. The liturgy was important to me, and the role of the organ and the music in the service was important to me. Although I wouldn't have been able to articulate that so young, but looking back, for sure. And in fact, I just found a book yesterday of great cathedrals of England, and I remember this is an old book of mine, and I looked at I absolutely loved the buildings, and the thought of making music in those buildings with those organs. I was sort of really sort of it was a given that this was the route I wanted to take. Although I have to be honest, the thought really at the time was that it would be nice to have a choir that could sing well. I didn't realize that it was my responsibility to make that choir sing well. That's how naive I was. So obviously, when I actually got into the world of cathedral music, when I became assistant organist of Rochester Cathedral and then the organist of Rochester Cathedral, it was very clear to me that it was up to me to make the standards that I so admired when I was younger. So that was the beginning, and the feelings I had towards the music within the liturgy were so strong. It didn't really matter whether there was one person there or 1,000 people there. It didn't make any difference to me. It was just doing the Opus Dei, really.
I think that for me, I used to see the organ as, there was a spectrum between one end, the serious liturgical music playing hymns, and then in the middle, sort of concert music for the organ that was still classical in nature, but wasn't connected to the liturgy as much. And then at the far end, theater organ, organs in movie theaters, accompanying silent films, or more playful organ. But as I got older, I realized in some ways it's more of a circle, because a function of the organ in a liturgical context is to actually animate the story of each Sunday's, in the year.
Yes, the organ it doesn't have any words to it as an instrument, like many instruments, but it has the power and the capabilities with all its color to be able to evoke great atmosphere, which I think is part of good liturgy and a response to the liturgy. So I think the role of the organ, and also its place, should I say, within the building. The building is part of the instrument, and so these great buildings which I spoke about when I looked through my book of cathedrals, that's all part of it. So it's the building and the architecture that weds in with the organ, and so one's emotions can be carried by the organ's color and how it depicts certain moods. I think the organist has to be very creative and very aware of atmosphere, and I think that's the thing that matters more than anything in terms of trying to convey a message and making right choices in terms of how you play, how you register, how you react in the moment. It's all about the moment, and I think that's a really important thing. Obviously, you practice and you practice and you practice, but there has to be that moment in anything where it has to be at that particular time and never to be repeated again.
Yeah, and maybe you can talk a bit about what it feels like to perform this role in a building like Temple Church with such a complex and well, just a mythical sort of history for somebody who wouldn't have any connection to the Christian church to just learn a little bit about the story of that building and how it's played into 1,000 years of history. I think it's a lot to fathom. And what are some of the most interesting things about it for you, and how does it feel to be part of that story?
For me, the rich heritage of music in Temple Church sits very firmly in my mind. George Thornton, obviously the most incredible and important influence on the music that we have nowadays, but before that, Wolford Davies, and even John Stanley in centuries ago. So there is a great musical heritage here, which I'm very conscious about, which is supported by the Inns of Court. And a lot of our congregations that come to the church are made up of members of the inns, and often the services we provide are memorial services. So there's obviously a huge responsibility to get that right. Tourists, of course, who may never have set foot in the building, come along, and the building itself is a gem, and the acoustics are particularly fine. So it's a matter of maximizing what we can offer, showing them that we still keep the rich heritage going through the choirs that we have, and hopefully the quality of the music that we provide. The round part of the church, which is the oldest part of the church, has a particularly fine acoustic, and it's absolutely wonderful to sing in that part of the building. But the chancel area is bright and wide, and the whole feeling of the church is warm, and people feel, I think, very involved, but it's big enough for people not to feel intimidated, or should I say, people who they can feel involved, but they don't actually have to feel that they have to participate in any particular way. So the music is a vehicle. We do that for them, if you like.
Supporting the wonders of liturgical texts in church may seem at first glance to be a far cry from performing the soundtrack to a blockbuster composed by Hans Zimmer, who has scored films like the Dark Knight trilogy, Blade Runner 2049, and Pirates of the Caribbean. But the film Interstellar contains themes about life, death, the beyond, and maybe it's for this reason the composer uses a natural acoustic to support the organ in his score.
This all came about very, very quickly, because I think it was a bit of a last-minute idea of his to actually try and record it live. And I do remember this music coming through electronically, sort of daily, and even during the period of time recording it. So yeah, it was a bit of a challenge at the time.
Mm-hmm. And did you have any idea what the film was about as you were learning and recording this music?
No, we were not allowed to know. Well, that's not quite the right answer, but we were not allowed to know until he unveiled the story at a dinner, which sort of was the start of the recording week. So we knew enough about it, but it was still all clothed in secrecy. I didn't really understand it. This whole thing about this important theme that runs the way through, and the significance of that was all a mystery to us. And the score was not marked Interstellar. It had a secret code name to it, so he didn't even know. No, it was all secret.
The veil of mystery surrounding the production is ultimately lifted when the crew arrives and Sayer realizes this was a bigger project than he had anticipated.
Well, the people were lovely. It's just the whole idea it became clear to me that there was a lot of money being spent on them coming all the way from LA to record something that may in fact not work. So I felt a certain responsibility, which I hadn't necessarily twigged until that point. So yeah, it all felt a bit different from my normal existence, should I say. I mean, I'm used to playing organ recitals and playing Choral Evensong. So to be suddenly faced with an epic blockbuster film, I just thought it was a great honor, and that I should happen to be in the position of organist at Temple Church when this came along. I mean, they came for the church; they didn't come for me, and I knew that. But on the other hand, I was the person who was here, so I thought, I felt responsible.
And maybe you can talk about the feeling. Normally when you play the organ, you have a specific role, which we talked about before, and now in this context, suddenly you have an incredibly different role. You're recording something that is going to be attached to a film, and is going to have a very different size audience. What did it feel like when you were actually playing, or how did that difference kind of play out in your mind or spirit?
Well, I didn't really think about the film and the audience. I just wanted to make. I mean, I approached it the same as I would anything. Just try and get some good sounds out of the organ. Do your best. Prepare the best you can, and then leave it to those that are responsible for making the sound. Obviously, they had the wonderful equipment here, so the organ sounds better than it's ever done, I think, on the film, and they were able to layer the sound of the organ, so it sounds bigger than it really is, even though it's a pretty colossal sound in the building. They were able to magnify that, but I wasn't in charge of that sort of thing. But no, I approached it like I do anything. So I think my main concern was to get the right sounds that would make Hans Zimmer glad to be there. Well, it's interesting that Christopher Nolan said that the organ has a religiosity to it. And I think people associate the organ with church. So just by its very existence and the sound, I think people have a connection, whether you're a believer or not, that they associate it with religion. And because the film is about life and existence and loss, all the things that are connected to the human condition, you can't really disassociate the two. Whether you believe or not believe, this whole thing about what's beyond is something we always question, and it does have that element. I know it's not the core narrative of the film, but it is about survival and about what happens next, and I think that throws you right back to religion. And the church and the organ, of course, being one of the oldest instruments ever. So yeah, it's whether people think that deeply, I don't know, but it has that religious feel about it, which gives the film a little bit more dignity and pathos, I think.
The dignity and pathos that the music evokes is more than a product of the instrument and the acoustics. There is, of course, the contents of the music itself. Watching the film, I'm struck by the recurrence of a single chord, which highlights important moments in the story where feelings of the power of time are elicited. and it comes as no surprise to find that the chord in question is a C major, a chord known for its dramatic use.
The power of a C major chord is extraordinary. What that can do to one's emotions, but like I was saying much earlier on, religion and how people approach the church is very personal. So I think the organ as an instrument has a sort of a role to play in that it has so many facets to it. It can conjure up drama in a flash, and actually the beauty of just a single line with an accompaniment, as indeed is that moment that follows the C major chord, is so simple and yet so powerful. I think the whole scenario of the organ having this huge tonal palette is I think one of the reasons why he saw this as the opportunity to explore it in a film such as this.
It's what you said about the C major chord. I agree completely, and I can think of other C major chords like in Bluebeard's Castle and Bartok's, and I wonder. I think for a long time in music, I thought that relative pitch mattered, but absolute pitch did not matter. And that when you're transposing music, it turns into it's this mathematical thing where you can just, as long as you start at one spot and then you build the music around that spot, it doesn't really matter if it's C or E or A. What's the difference between a C major chord and an E major chord?
Well, I'd say it's to do with overtones and resonances. I mean, particularly on the organ, it's the lowest resonating note on the organ, and I think it has a mood. I mean, musicians talk about, well, D flat major is a darker key, B major is a brighter key. I mean, so I do think there is an element of these keys sounding different, but I think it's to do. I think in a basic way, it's to do with the overtones of the instrument, the depth of the pipes. In the organ's case, for example, and he was fascinated by the sound of these lower notes. In fact, they would record just the lower notes that actually would sort of make the building rattle, and I think that's also in there. You wouldn't be able to identify it. And they also recorded the organ blower being turned on and off, and I think that's in the mix. So I've diverted myself away from your question, but I think the C major chord has a particular resonance to it and grandeur, strong. I mean, take the Saint-Saëns Organ Symphony. When that moment that the organ comes in, that's C major. It's the lowest note on the organ, and therefore has a real foundation to it. And the last note of the whole score, right at the very end, the closing credits, it's a 2-octave scale of C major. It just simply goes up and up and up, and you probably, by that stage you may have turned off. But if you listen to the very end, I mean, a lot of the good music is in the credits, and it is a 2-octave C major scale, and I can't help thinking that we all start as musicians with C major. It's the first scale we learn, so it seems to have a fundamental connection to our beginning. I don't know whether that's too profound, but it's a nice thought.
You're listening to the FutureStops podcast, an initiative of the Royal Canadian College of Organists. My name is Blake Hargreaves, and I'm your host as we explore the world of the 21st century organ. We just heard today's feature piece, the Interstellar Suite, composed by Hans Zimmer and performed by Roger Sayer at Temple Church. This recording was made at a concert which Sayer is sharing on his YouTube channel. Along with other organ repertoire, this channel is the only place you'll be able to hear this pipe organ adaptation of the full Interstellar soundtrack by Hans Zimmer. Some commenters say the adaptation reveals hidden melodies and sounds they hadn't heard in the film.
So the YouTube channel is for all. So there's a standard repertoire on there. So you know, if you like Bach and you like Franck and you like Messiaen and Vienne and so on and so forth, that's on there. And I release something every Monday. And at the moment I'm releasing once a month a movement from Interstellar, because that's what I've promised people, because I have the score and the parts from the film, and Hans Zimmer has allowed me to have those. So I do have access to the score, and I'm transcribing this music from the organ score, and also trying to include some other lines that would have not been played by the organ. So I'm releasing those on a monthly basis, and then the other weeks it's a mixture of standard repertoire, unusual repertoire. So it's a bit for everybody. And in the summer, I did do a series of 4 concerts online, which was interesting. And in each of those concerts had a sort of 10-minute section of Interstellar, which again brought young people in. And I do have a sort of a wish to promote this as an event where I could tour with it. It's just a sort of a pie in the sky idea that perhaps go to the States and have a concert for young people, introducing them to the organ, doing a little demonstration, playing some of the standard repertoire, but also including in it movements from Interstellar. So there's something, an hour really, not a long. It's just an idea. While I still can travel and play, that I would like to maximize this opportunity. So that's just an idea in my head at the moment as how I could sell this organ education somehow to younger people through Interstellar mainly.
Interstellar comes across as an example of contemporary explorations of spirituality. The film combines many far-reaching ideas. In the face of physics, time is an illusion. Whatever we believe is beyond our reach has something to tell us about the limits of our imagination. Forces which cannot be measured, like love, might provide more useful life-saving information than those which can be. As the pipe organ moves into the 21st century, its ability to invoke these ideas for contemplation through sound and music raises questions about how to invite people to enjoy it who might otherwise be resistant to its religious surroundings. Inclusion in a Hollywood blockbuster about theoretical physics gets it right by placing this instrument where its symbolic power can manifest in a new way. We'd like to thank our guest, Roger Sayer, for joining us today, and thank you for listening to the episode. Join us on social media at FutureStops and FutureStops Podcast, where you can find a link to Roger Sayer's YouTube channel and bring your voice to the conversation. FutureStops is a podcast from the Royal Canadian College of Organists, produced by Andrew O'Connor, with Haley Raymond as community manager and executive producer Elizabeth Shannon. I'm your host, Blake Hargreaves.